Picture a zombie in your head. How dead is it? Like, is it bloody? Is it dusty? Is it mutated? Does it have tentacles or weird appendages? Is it walking slowly? Is it running? Zombies. No monsters quite like them. For real, they're kind of all over the place. And unlike vampires or werewolves, there's no official way to do zombies. Thralls, undead, infected, mutants, parasites, grafts, throngs. There are dozens of different kinds, and the only thing that all zombies have in common is this. They were once people. And now, they are not. I remember the first time that I saw a zombie very clearly. I remember the time that I saw a zombie clearly, not that I saw a zombie in HD. Anyway, I was at a friend's house, and his brother put on Resident Evil 3.
Resident Evil.
The opening cinematic left me petrified, and I had nightmares about it. The endless dead, swarming my neighborhood and slowly making their way up to my house. What I didn't know at the time was that Resident Evil had literally cooked up the modern zombie template. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's dig deep and find where the very first zombie was buried before it rose from the grave. Somewhere in Haiti, a grave is dug up by a secret society who aim to use the exhumed as an unwilling servant to tirelessly work the fields. The word zombie was brought to the island by African slaves, and given that its original meaning was tied to the souls of the dead, it's no surprise that it became a staple of its folklore and supernatural world. Seeing bodies missing from their graves probably did not assuage the notion that zombies were some sort of undead. But there's one thing I forgot to mention. These zombies are actually alive. Haitian voodoo can be used to heal, but it can be used to harm others as well. And when it is used to kill, this sometimes means killing the soul rather than the body. Let me explain. The victim of a bokah, a voodoo sorcerer, is often drugged to the point of becoming comatose and pronounced dead, and ends up buried alive. A few days later, the bokah will dig them up and use them as an unwilling servant, keeping them under his control using a potion which prolongs their stupor and keeps them subservient and unquestioning. He has created a zombie. But there is a cure. During baptism, Haitian priests often use blessed salt instead of holy water. It is said that salt gives balance to the person and lets them distinguish good from evil. This is why the zombie is never given salt by their new master, so they can obey mindlessly and without question. This means that the first archetype of the zombie we encounter is surprisingly not the undead, but rather the thrall. The thrall is a human being that is enslaved to the will of another through drugs, magic, mind control, or some other form of interference. They are still very much alive and can often be saved from their condition, although this is not always the case. Now that we know what type of zombie this is, we can place it on the spectrum. Alright, let's set the ground rules for this thing. Like I said before, the only thing that all zombies have in common is that they were once a person before they underwent the process of zombification. So the question here becomes, what does the process of zombification entail for its victim? Or rather, how far from who they originally were have they gone? All the way to the right means they are as far as they could possibly be from their original form and personality, and have transformed into something completely different, retaining none of the original qualities of the person they once were. Conversely, all the way to the left is someone who is barely changed by zombification, and could probably be returned to normal. And I figured that that's exactly where the Haitian zombie stands, slightly right of left. Their body remains intact, and their mind is only subdued until someone frees them from their condition. Okay, while the official history of the zombie starts in the 18th century and there are some stories written with them in it, these seem to place Haitian voodoo front and center rather than the zombies themselves. And while it is very interesting, it's not the kind of zombie we know and love. What gives? Ghouls, ghasts, wights, draugr, janshur, you name it. Folklore is full of the living dead, and while they were pretty self-explanatory, mere undead corpses never earned themselves a name. All of these other monsters had a story to them, some particularity that justified the distinction and a unique name. And often, what could have been a zombie was just not named so. In 1922, H.P. Lovecraft released a short story as a serial, Herbert West, Reanimator. The story details how a mad scientist develops an obsession with returning the freshly dead to life, and uses his formula to reanimate multiple corpses over the course of a decade. These reanimated perfectly display the clear characteristics of the second archetype of zombie, the undead. The undead zombie is a being that does not belong in the world of the living, brought back by science, magic, or darker powers still. It is often a horrid thing that mindlessly seeks to maintain itself by consuming human flesh, and it being unthinking and slow is a sign of its deteriorating bodily functions. However, it can sometimes be physically powerful, agile, and intelligent, especially when it retains some memory or fragment of its former self, which can raise the question of whether a soul remains in them. This is something Dr. Herbert West finds out firsthand when his most successful experiment returns at the head of an army of the dead to claim his revenge. West's reanimated are very much dead, but while the horrendous descriptions of their ghoulish and cannibal practices definitely make them inhuman in spirit, their bodies are not modified much further than normal human bodies, either mutilated or pushed to the extreme. Rather, the most dangerous specimens seem to have devolved into ape-like predators. What is interesting is that at no point does Lovecraft name these monstrosities, meaning that we are retroactively assigning them the identity of zombie. A much more common thing was to call them by other names, and in all fairness, sometimes it was warranted. Richard Matheson's book, I Am Legend, was ahead of its time. Okay, when I said I Am Legend, you probably thought of the movie featuring the guy who likes spaghetti, didn't you? Well, that is only the latest in a series of movies loosely based on this story. The book features a pandemic-induced apocalypse and a lone survivor fighting off the undead. One small hiccup though. In the book, he calls them vampires, even though the creatures he describes are more of a zombie-vampire hybrid, if we're being honest. And to be fair, while the protagonist of the story really focuses on the vampire element, the book also does a good job of not losing itself in this aspect, and Matheson tries to inject an element of realism into the whole affair, with varying success. What matters to us, and what makes this book unique, is that Matheson hits a double whammy for zombie archetypes: the undead and the infected. The idea behind the infected is simple. These people were changed by a disease that zombified them. The gravity of the zombification process depends on the gravity of the disease. Some can be cured, but the vast majority are hopeless cases. What does the disease do? Well, that's entirely up to the writer, but most often it either turns people into bloodthirsty animalistic creatures or reanimates their bodies. Matheson's book was the first to do both. His undead vampires are ravenous beasts, dead bodies reanimated by bacteria, moved only by the desire for human blood and with little semblance of their humanity left. They're not as mindless as the West reanimated, but they have very unique physiological characteristics derived from the bacteria, which protect them from most harm while contained within their bodies, but will rapidly consume them from within if exposed to air, which is why vampires turn to dust when pierced with stakes. It's very creative, honestly. While the undead are those reanimated by the disease, the infected are those who survive with it still in their bodies. Following the vampire theme, they share a similar aversion to sunlight with the undead, as well as a thirst for blood. But what is interesting in this story is that the infected are much closer to humans than the undead, and some have learned to live with the disease. This begins to raise some more complicated questions about zombies that we'll get back to later. For now, I think this warrants placing them further to the left in the spectrum. Honestly though, if we're going to be talking about a movie that was inspired by this book, then there's only one movie to talk about. Few movies can be pointed to as the origin of an entire genre, but I think few people would disagree that the zombie as we know it was born on one dark night in 1968. The Night of the Living Dead. If you have an hour and a half to kill, I'd recommend giving this one a watch. It's free on YouTube, it's campy, it's brutal, it's the grandfather of all zombie movie tropes. I don't know if Romero realized what he was doing at the time, but he hit the nail in the coffin, the zombie in the head, and the ball out of the park. His movie depicts the first zombie apocalypse brought to the big screen, and his ghouls are easily the basis for all undead zombies that will follow. They are slow and stupid, weak to fire, dismemberment, and headshots. However, they're relentless, and at times, they surprise you. Some of them still remember a couple of tricks from when they were alive, and if they get close to you, you are done for. Most importantly, there is never only one, and for every one you stop, there are 4 ready to take its place. All the cliches are here, man. The government struggling to keep tabs on the situation, the ragtag group of survivors who distrust each other, the high mortality rate of characters. But Night of the Living Dead was an understated movie, an experiment. 10 years later, Romero delivered the perfected version of his original vision, and this time around, he called his monsters by their proper name.
With those bay doors open, there's gonna be 1,000 zombies in here.
Dawn of the Dead is a very special movie, because it can be considered both the first wildly successful zombie movie and also the first movie to subvert the idea of the zombie with its underlying messages. This one's also somehow free on YouTube. Go watch it, now! Oh wait, it's restricted in your country, isn't it? Well, if you go to surfshark.com/Begast or use code Begast, you can get a VPN to change your IP and watch zombie movies to your heart's content. And you get 4 extra months at checkout. With Surfshark VPN, you can not only protect your privacy, but also access movies and shows that are restricted in your region. I personally use it all the time when I travel and want to connect my laptop to a public Wi-Fi without any dangers, or when I'm abroad and I want to keep watching my weekly shows or movies that are only available in a particular region. It's super easy to use, and you get unlimited simultaneous device connections. You can use on your phone, desktop, smart TV, or as a browser extension. And they have a 30 days money-back guarantee, so you can always try it for free first. And if you do, use our link or the code BEGAS for an extra 4 months. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Now let's return to the living dead. This time around, the zombies are even dumber, which makes them barely an inconvenience if you know how to get around them. For Romero, zombies serve a narrative function not too different from a natural disaster, always present and only dangerous if you stop paying attention, which can and will probably happen. After all, just like in other doomsday movies, after a zombie apocalypse, those you might have to worry about the most may very well be the living. Add that to the list of things we're going to cover later. Anyway, what matters to us now is that with his movies, Romero single-handedly defined the most important element of facing a zombie horde. All it takes is one mistake and everything goes downhill. So, how about we let the viewer make that mistake? Resident Evil is special. Many would agree that it is the zombie franchise. Sorry, House of the Dead. With a widely successful saga of movies. Again, sorry, House of the Dead. But it's the Resident Evil games that change the game. It's one thing to watch people struggle powerlessly against the endless hordes of zombies, but it's another thing entirely to have to do it yourself. You can most definitely take down a zombie in Resident Evil. They are slow, and they are stupid, and, well, you know the drill. If you have a gun, you can bring one down with 3 to 6 shots if you know what you're doing. That's not the problem. The problem is that there are about 10 of them in the house with you, and you do not have enough bullets to deal with all of them. Which means you need to avoid them, and keep track of where they are, and constantly be ready for one of them to come at you from a corner. Also, of course, there's not just 10 of them in there. And of course, there are zombie dogs. It took zombies entering the world of video games and Resident Evil to perfect what is probably the greatest strength and also the most iconic aspect of the zombie. There is zero margin for error. Dying in a zombie apocalypse is always your fault. You were not outsmarted. You failed to gauge the danger of the situation and to take appropriate measures to keep yourself safe. This philosophy extends to almost all iterations of zombies in video games. What changes, however, is the zombies themselves. Those infected by the T-virus and suffering from the cannibal disease in Resident Evil are not technically undead, but stop just short of it. As a lab-grown bioweapon, the virus has multiple strains that have varying effects on its hosts, and can in turn mutate them into unpredictable, monstrous forms. The mutant is the next archetype in the zombie spectrum. Be they infected who were changed by a disease, victims of radioactive exposure or magical interference, mutants usually retain little of their original personalities and instead turn into violent and aggressive predators with a preference for human flesh. What's interesting about mutants is that while their identity changes, they often do retain intelligence. As its games progressed, some of the more powerful mutant zombies of Resident Evil assumed antagonistic roles, the most notorious among them being the main villain of the franchise, Albert Wesker. But if we're talking about mutants, there's another game we need to talk about. Resident Evil gives you the responsibility to overcome zombies on your own, but Left 4 Dead makes you share this responsibility with up to 3 other players. As 4 individuals left behind, you have to rally together and escape the city before you are overrun by the infected. And this game makes you feel like that could happen at any moment. But, you've played zombie games before. You know the golden rule: the zombie horde is a force of nature. It only ever catches you if you make mistakes. Well, the special infected love to help you make mistakes, because this game really put all of its chips on the mutants and it paid off spectacularly. Avoiding boomers, spitters, and chargers, keeping track of jockeys, smokers, and hunters, and praying you don't encounter any tanks or witches is the essence of this game. And you have to do it all while fighting off the endless horde. It's a winning formula, and it explains why this game is still widely played even today. I think the Left 4 Dead infected are varied enough and monstrous enough to warrant being placed here, just to the left of the Resident Evil zombies. Because, yeah, you're cooking up some weird shit, but not as weird as what Resident Evil does sometimes. They've kind of pushed the envelope on what can be counted as a zombie. I think it's safe to say that this kind of approach to designing zombies became the norm for a lot of video games. A mindless, swarming horde of average zombies, accompanied by powerful variants that spice up the combat. Faced against this winning formula, those who wanted to be original had to find ways to innovate. I sincerely believe that straying away from real-world settings is what allowed the zombie to truly shine. Also, there's going to be a lot of zombies from now on, so I'm just going to slap them on the spectrum as I talk about them. Feel free to fight me in the comments if you disagree with their placements. Zombies have become staples of fantasy role-playing games. Some franchises like Dungeons & Dragons include them as a simple but deceptively dangerous and resilient enemy amidst a far more colorful repertoire of undead. Others, like the Hollows of Dark Souls, are slowly losing their humanity, which means that they can be used as enemies, but also as vehicles for storytelling and to convey the atmosphere of dark fantasy settings. But there is one franchise that is contributing to diversifying zombies more than any other. In Magic the Gathering, zombies are one of the most common creature types, and often revolve around mechanics that bring them back from the graveyard, or that swell their numbers through zombie tokens. A little side note, by the way, an interesting thing about these tokens is that they all have 2 power and toughness, which I have always felt is a simple and effective way to convey that they don't die to something that would kill a common human. In MTG, the variety of planes of the multiverse has resulted in a zombie kaleidoscope. They are all undead, but the stereotypically Transylvanian zombies of Innistrad, who are mindless thralls or stitched-together horrors, stand in stark contrast to the mummified and revered Eternals of Amonkhet, who retain the skills they had in life. The accursed Draugr of Kaldheim are greedy raiders and treasure hunters cursed by their traitorous king. The returned who escape the hells of Theros lose their memories as a price for their newfound freedom from death, and the Sipsig hordes that serve the Sultai and Tarkir can go from being soldiers and slaves to advisors and protectors. All of these ideas feed on existing mythologies and tropes to bring new flavors to their ever-expanding repertoire of zombies, and honestly, these are unique enough to warrant their own video. And yet, I think that the most iconic zombies of Magic are the ones from the plane of Grixis, which are representative of a wider notion in fantasy settings. The zombie horde rarely chooses its purpose. Most often, it is subordinated to another entity. Grixis is a hellscape, a world where life is so absent that the dead don't wither, and where necromancer lords endlessly pit their armies against each other to settle old grudges, gain supremacy, or because they have forgotten how to do anything else. This is not unlike the vampire counts in the world of Warhammer Fantasy or the Soulblight Gravelords of Age of Sigmar, for whom zombies are a blunt tool, foot soldiers meant to be thrown into the grinder of a perpetual power struggle between their lords. If you prefer the grim darkness of the far future, there are ample unfortunate bodies bound into servitude that could easily qualify as zombies, from the demonic undead poxwalkers to the mindless Necron warriors. Right about here. But if we are talking about an army of the dead at the beck and call of a malevolent master, then we need to talk about the Scourge. In World of Warcraft, the vast majority of the reanimated dead are brought back into the service of the Lich King, who commands his host of horrors in a war against the living, an army of skeletons, ghouls, and, you guessed it, zombies. Many of these undead, however, are also reshaped into inventively dangerous forms, the most iconic of which is probably the Frankenstein monster-like abominations. Interestingly, the defeat of the Lich King would not remove the threat of the Scourge. Instead, the undead would become a wild, uncontrollable tide of hunger and destruction. You know, like a zombie apocalypse. It takes about 20 seconds for the rage virus to take control of an infected human. From being full-on bitten to ingesting even a drop of blood, it doesn't matter. 20 seconds is all the time you're gonna have to kill your friend, your husband, your daughter before they turn into a violent predator that will savagely rip you apart. What's really messed up, though, is that this is not guilt-free killing. They are no different from a rabid animal. They are still alive and could very well be saved if a cure was found. But you do not have a cure, and you do not have the time. Because these infected can run. 28 Days Later was a paradigm shift. It was the movie that showed us that even a slight adjustment is all it takes for a monster to become 10 times more frightening. And ever since it came out, zombies never stopped running. But strangely enough, that was not the movie's greatest contribution to the zombie genre. While writer Alex Garland said he was inspired by the Resident Evil zombies, director Danny Boyle doesn't consider 28 Days Later a zombie movie. And after watching 28 Years Later, I understand what he means. These movies are less about zombies than they are about people, which is also the case for the most prolific zombie franchise of the 21st century. The Walking Dead is a giant. From its comic book origins to a wildly successful TV series and even video games, the franchise has thrived across the board. And you can feel the influence from Dawn of the Dead all the way to 28 Days Later in this franchise. What makes these stories compelling is not the zombies, but rather how characters learn to survive against them. After all, the zombie hordes have no emotion, no agenda, no purpose other than to test how prepared, willing, and dedicated people are to survive, and to measure the mettle and character of each individual. The side effect of this is that ultimately the story is not about them, and this sees them often relegated to the background. While other iterations have moved it back in time, the essence of the undead Armageddon is always the same. Shows like Kingdom are as much about the way people handle a zombie outbreak as they are about the misinformation, politics, and repressive violence that often follow an outbreak. Be it in games like Project Zomboid, in TV shows like Black Summer, or movies like Train to Busan, the focus is on the struggles, failures, and past lives of those who now find themselves caught in a zombie apocalypse, and asks the question of how much these people need to change in order to survive. In this regard, no piece of media has given as complete a picture of this as World War Z. And I do mean the bestseller written by Max Brooks, by the way, not the movie that borrowed its name. It is a collection of individual testimonies of people talking about all sorts of topics, from losing family members to losing faith in their religion, from military logistics to medical research. This zombie apocalypse is shown to us from more angles than ever before, and harkens back to those first TV interviews conducted in Romero's movies. We have to talk about zombies. We have to have opinions on them because they used to be our neighbors, our loved ones, our world. Now they are no longer our neighbors, no longer our loved ones, but they are still our world. And it's this aspect of zombies that, curiously enough, has led to them being humanized.
Mary, I'm warning you, okay?
Most zombies are dumb, to the point of being kind of funny. It should come as no surprise then that there are zombie comedies. While there were some movies that tried it before, the first movie to do it to great international success was Shaun of the Dead, followed 5 years later by Zombieland, and setting the trend for these types of movies. Dark humor, quirky storytelling, and exaggerated, ridiculously creative zombie violence. This is echoed in games like Call of Duty Zombies, Dead Rising, and Plants vs. Zombies, where the player is incentivized to kill zombies by the dozen with an increasingly ridiculous arsenal. Likewise, while some animes stick to the tried-and-true horror of the zombie apocalypse, others fully lean into the cartoonish violence of zombie disposal. These stories mostly drop the philosophical horrors of the apocalypse to instead focus on tongue-in-cheek social commentary, funny situations, and on the romantic relationships that blossom from a post-apocalyptic setting, falling into the category that director Edgar Wright coined as rom-zom-com. And this, it seems, was the winning formula for the following decade. We love monsters, and sometimes we love monsters. With the success of franchises like Twilight, it was only a matter of time before somebody decided it was time to get the zombies in on the fun. The TV series Pushing Daisies and the animated movie Corpse Bride were ahead of their time in presenting a zombie character as a romantic interest, but were later followed by a flood of romantic comedy movies in the 2010s, as well as shows like iZombie. All of this opened the door for a new archetype of zombie, the friendly zombie.
I have so many questions.
Friendly zombies vary in appearance depending on the message that the story wants to tell.
If I don't eat, I become dumber.
But what is inevitably true is that they have contrasting qualities which complicate their relationship with people. A zombie of sound mind might have a rotting or otherwise problematic body. And conversely, a well-preserved zombie might have come back wrong and not be entirely who they used to be. What is invariably true about them is that they, or those around them, are actively trying to have the zombie be able to continue acting like a person. Because of this, I believe that these zombies generally tend to occupy a spot left of center, as there is usually at least one aspect of them that is still very much human. However, a good zombie comedy or romance story never loses sense of the morbid nature of the situation. Once the audience's guard is down, reality will come knocking, and they will be reminded of the true nature of zombies. There's something very particular about The Last of Us. The reason the TV show is so good is because it was based on a fantastic video game. And the reason the video game was so good was because it learned from all the other zombie media before it and used it to craft a compelling, heart-wrenching story. But interestingly, The Last of Us is not very original. There is nothing about this story that I have not already mentioned in this video, or that other franchises have not done before. Except for one thing.
Cordyceps, aspergillus, any one of them could become capable of burrowing into our brains and taking control not of millions of us, but billions of us.
As terrifying as the human cruelty and desperation of the world depicted in The Last of Us is, nothing is more terrifying than the objective truth that the Cordyceps fungus exists, and that there are currently living organisms being controlled by entomopathogenic fungi. They are the closest we will ever have to real-world zombies, and it is not impossible that we could one day share in their fate. Another zombie archetype, while aesthetically the parasite zombie looks more like an infected, undead, or mutant, in practical terms it is closer to the thrall. The zombification process involves a parasitic life form using a dead or living body as a puppet. The degree of control they have on the body and how much they modify it as a consequence of their occupation varies depending on the parasite. The refreshing thing about the parasite is that the zombification process is often as self-evident as it is horrifying. And while the Cordyceps infected put up a good fight, there's another video game franchise that I think takes the cake. Halo Combat Evolved was widely marketed as a war between mankind and the many alien races of the Covenant, and players had no reason to believe otherwise until the popcorn started running at them. One look at the Flood makes you realize that there's something very wrong here, and this is a kind of enemy unlike anything you have faced before. No lore is needed when you provide the right amount of build-up, then release these creatures on the player after a horrifying revelation. You, like the dead soldiers whose footage you just recovered, are not prepared to face this. You need to run. The Flood can infest living and dead bodies, and they can reshape their host into a variety of forms depending on the size and condition of the victim's body, from mere incubators to deadly combat forms. While the Flood are most often feral and mindless in their pursuit of biomass, what makes them truly terrifying is that this is not always the case. A Gravemind is the final stage in the development of Flood organisms. It is a colossal alien life form, endowed with the knowledge of everything that its victims were, including their memories. Wild Flood are very dangerous, but directed by a Gravemind, they become a threat to all life. For the vast majority of the zombies' history, the explanation for how they work has been hand-waved. It's magic, it's a virus, it's the powers of hell. Don't ask any further questions and enjoy the show. This, I think, is a terrible waste. Because what the truly successful zombie franchise has learned is that the mystery of zombification is, often enough, the only mysterious thing about zombies. The amount of importance given to this mystery sets the tone for the story. In my opinion, the more out there you get, the more interesting the zombie. And as a zombie parasitic hive mind, I believe that the Flood are very close to the rightmost end of the spectrum. There's only one thing holding them back. There's one last zombie I want to talk about, and I think it deserves that spot.
It spoke to me.
Keep us whole, make us whole. Marker, the sacred relic, the message from our creators.
But I do not understand.
Our bodies are from the marker. Our bodies will return to it.
The words are in the section walls, under the floor panels, under my skin.
Unity is forever. Death is only the beginning. Keep us whole.
I need to carve them out. I need to know what they mean. I need to know what they do. I need to know what I am. What I can do.
The pilgrimage is at hand. Unity is at hand.
I can make us whole again.
I do want to die. I do want to die. I do want to die.
Dead Space is about an engineer trapped within the confines of a spaceship, using improvised weaponry against nightmarish abominations. And the source of this problem, you soon learn, is alien. They call them markers. It's not clear what these black obelisks are or the meaning of the symbols inscribed upon them. What is clear is that they are transmitters, emitting some sort of signal. Once exposed to them, individuals begin to suffer from symptoms not unlike dementia, and begin to compulsively draw the symbols on any surface they can. Continued exposure makes most victims erratic and violent, but some are given clearer purpose, seeing in their demented scribblings a higher calling, the building of more markers, and the continued transmission of the signal. What is far more concerning, however, is the effect that the signal has on the dead. The same signal sequence that drives the living insane is a genetic imprint that reshapes the dead into something new. Necromorphs are, in my opinion, the ultimate sci-fi zombie, and they're my personal favorite. They combine the creative body horror of the Left 4 Dead infected with the foreboding alien vibe of the Flood, wrapping the whole in a gruesomely hellish aesthetic that mirrors some of the darker Resident Evil designs. They have elements of thrall, undead, infected, mutant, and parasite, and yet they are none of these things. That the necromorphs retain any semblance of their original forms is merely accidental. The boundaries of bodies mean little to them, and even cutting them down into pieces does not mean they will stop. In every portion of flesh is a newborn, mutated into existence by the thrumming chorus of the markers. A form without life, driven by a singular goal. To make us all whole again.
Likes, subscribes, comments.
This zombie is fed exclusively on these things, so if you want him to persevere into the future and make more content, please feed him. He is starving, and he needs you. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Thank you all for watching. We'll continue to make stuff. Special thanks to the patrons. You guys are awesome. Okay, bye.